I didn't expect it. Not in a million years. After a month of being away in Germany, factory visits, endless negotiations, and battling in boardrooms, stepping into the hospital felt like stepping into another world. The gleaming glass exterior of Apex University Hospital stood tall against the New York skyline, just as it always did. But inside was chaos. And I hadn't even realized just how much I was blind to. I walked into the lobby, dragging my suitcase behind me, feeling the weight of the long flight. The antiseptic smell hit me first, the familiar, comforting scent of sterile floors and busy people. The usual symphony of beeping monitors, hurried footsteps, and hushed conversations. But there, right in the center of it all, was something different. Dr. Evan Lewis, head of cardiology and an old friend, was kneeling in front of a man. His hands steady, his focus sharp as he tried to save a life. No theatrics, no drama, just pure, unrelenting professionalism. And then, the sound cut through the calm. A voice, loud, sharp, and shrill, cut through the tension like a knife. "What's wrong with you?" Froze. A young woman, probably no older than 23, stood there, glaring down at an elderly valet. Her outfit, an absurdly tight neon pink dress that barely covered her thighs, was completely out of place in a hospital. She was holding up traffic, both literal and metaphorical, as she lectured him over something trivial. "Why is my car parked in the sun? Do you have any idea what that does to my leather seats? It's going to ruin my purse," she barked at the elderly man, who, clearly embarrassed, muttered apologies as he tried to shuffle away. Her name tag read Sophie Richards. Intern. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Just a few feet away, Evan was still working to save a life. Sweat was beading on his forehead as he fought for this man's survival. And yet, this girl, this spoiled little intern, was turning the lobby into her own personal stage for a drama that couldn't have mattered less. My fists clenched, the anger rising in my chest. This was the future of my hospital. This was what my husband had been running. I'd given up so much, sacrificed my own career to support Mark, to protect this institution that my father had built, and this is what I came back to. But it didn't end there. I couldn't stay silent any longer. As I stood there, seething, I watched the scene unfold. Sophie turned to her phone, now filming the valet with her bright smile, as if she were the one who had been wronged. "Oh my God, you guys, this is insane. My day is ruined." "Like seriously ruined," she said, still laughing as she pointed the camera at the elderly man. I took a deep breath, swallowing my fury. I wasn't here to cause a scene. But the moment I saw her scornful face, the irony hit me hard. Evan, who had spent the last 15 years looking out for me, an actual doctor saving lives, was being overshadowed by a girl playing at the role of some entitled socialite. This was the new reality, wasn't it? The hospital, once a beacon of care and integrity, was rotting from the inside out. And I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. I knew from the moment I saw Sophie's petty little display that things had changed. Irreparably. The hospital I grew up in, the one my father had built, wasn't the same anymore. I wasn't prepared for this. I had come back expecting the usual. Daily operations, quiet meetings, and a few whispered conversations about the latest hospital expansion. But the reality was different. It was louder, more chaotic, more misguided. I hadn't even made it up to Mark's office yet, but I could already feel the walls closing in. And not just figuratively. My shoulders felt tight, my breath shallow. A few months ago, I'd stepped back to give Mark space to grow into his role as CEO. I supported him every way I could, keeping the board happy, handling the most difficult decisions so he could charm everyone around him, making it all look easy. I didn't mind it. But today, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. I had left for my business trip not knowing that things would change so much in just 1 month. I had seen how Mark interacted with the board, charming them with a smile, making promises he couldn't deliver, and leaning on me for the hard stuff. But I'd never seen this side of the hospital, this underbelly of arrogance, the apathy toward patients, the way the staff were being treated. I was standing in the lobby, and I was already feeling like an outsider. There was something in the air. Unease. The sound of footsteps, the chatter from the patients, the hum of the fluorescent lights. It all felt off. Not like the hospital I remembered. Not like the place that once made me proud to walk through its doors. It was then that I realized. I wasn't just walking back into a building. I was walking back into a war zone. The office I was headed to, the one on the 5th floor, had been my father's sanctuary. It was where he worked tirelessly, where he made decisions that changed lives. The place I had grown up in, watched my father lead with wisdom and compassion, never compromising on his integrity. I had been born into this legacy. But now it felt like I was standing at the door to my own personal battlefield. I wasn't ready for it. Before I could reach the elevator, I saw the familiar figure of Dr. Lewis again. He was still moving, his hands unshaken as he continued the life-saving process, while Sophie's voice echoed in the background, irritating as ever. "Just make sure you get my car parked right," she spat at the valet one more time. "I don't want to deal with another disaster today." Her entitled voice cut through my thoughts, but what followed was far worse. Could feel eyes on me. Eyes of the staff, patients, and even the few visitors who had gathered in the lobby. They saw me, the woman who walked in with no fanfare, no entourage. They knew me, but did I still know them? The weight of being the heir of this place, the chairwoman, felt heavier with every step I took. I hadn't even realized I was standing in front of the reception desk, my fingers white-knuckling the handle of my suitcase, until I heard a voice. "Excuse me, are you Katherine Hayes?" I turned, and for the first time today something seemed right. It was Evan, still crouched over the patient. But when he saw me standing there, his face softened, and I saw the familiar warmth that had always been there. "Katherine, is that you?" he asked, breathless. He nodded. "It's me, Evan." He wiped the sweat from his forehead, still kneeling, his face serious. "I haven't seen you in years. I didn't know you were back. I should have known. Your father always talked about you." The mention of my father hit me like a wave. A painful reminder that I was now in charge. That my father, the man who had built this empire, was gone. And the weight of his absence felt like it had just grown heavier. "Is everything okay here?" I asked, trying to steady myself. His eyes softened. "The patient's stable. But..." He trailed off, glancing at the scene around him. "We're working in a hospital, Katherine. But sometimes it feels more like a business. A damn business." His words stung. Because I knew exactly what he meant. Before I could say anything, Sophie's voice broke the quiet again. She had turned her back to the commotion and was now filming herself again. A self-absorbed queen in her own right. "Here we are. A total meltdown in the lobby. Can you believe it?" she said into her phone, still oblivious to the chaos she had caused. "What's wrong with people, right? I swear, I've never seen a more unprofessional group in my life." My hands clenched, my teeth grinding. I wasn't sure if it was the rage I was feeling from the scene before me, or the realization that this was Mark's reality. This was what he had allowed to take root. I stood there silently. Evan looked at me, then back to the hospital. His eyes filled with concern. "You're going to have to fix this, Katherine," he said. His voice low, as though he was speaking a truth that wasn't easy to hear. "Before it destroys everything." As I walked toward the elevator, the weight of Evan's words lingered in my mind. "Fix this, Katherine, before it destroys everything." It wasn't just a warning. It was a burden. A responsibility. I had to fix what my father had built. I couldn't let it crumble. But the cracks were already showing, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. When I stepped into the elevator, I noticed my reflection in the mirrored walls. A woman who had just returned from an exhausting month away, still dressed in a pristine white suit, the coffee stain on my pants a cruel reminder of what I'd just witnessed. But it wasn't just the stain. It was everything that had happened since I walked through those doors. I looked tired, yes, but beneath the exhaustion was something stronger. Something that had been simmering for too long. The elevator doors closed, but my mind was still spinning. What had I walked into? I had left a hospital that was once a place of healing, of ethics and trust, and returned to a house of mirrors, where nothing was as it seemed. I could feel it in the air, the tension, the betrayal, the weight of every corner I turned. My husband, Mark, had been playing his game behind my back, pretending to be the CEO, running the place with a smile and a few slick words. But beneath that charming facade, he was failing, miserably, and I had just walked back into the middle of it all. The elevator dinged as I arrived on the 5th floor, the floor where Mark's office was. The glass doors opened, revealing the sharp contrast between the polished executive floors and the chaos I had just left behind in the lobby. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to face him, but I had no choice. It was time to confront the man who had been pretending to be the hero while secretly dragging us down. Mark's office was still as grand as I remembered, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a perfect view of the city. The same desk, the same leather chairs, the same fancy decor. But today, as I stepped in, something felt off. The room was too quiet, almost suffocating. I wasn't sure if it was the stale air or the tension, but I felt like a stranger in a place that was once mine. I walked to the desk and set my suitcase down with a soft thud. Mark wasn't there. He had probably gone back to playing the role of the charming CEO in his meetings, far from the reality I had just witnessed downstairs. I pulled out my phone, checking the time. It was almost 10:30 a.m., and I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to wait any longer. Hit dial. The phone rang twice before Mark's voice echoed through the receiver. "Honey, it's so good to hear your voice. I thought you were going to be home by now. I've got a meeting with the Department of Health and I've got investors here. Things are chaotic. How's the trip? Did you land okay?" His voice was all smooth and rehearsed, like he hadn't just been playing games with our lives. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. I wasn't going to play along with this charade anymore. "Mark," I said, cutting him off. My voice was steady, but inside a storm was brewing. "I need you in the lobby. Now." There was a pause. A long, uncomfortable silence. "The lobby? But I'm in a meeting, Katherine." I don't care about your meeting," I snapped. "You need to get down here. Now." The silence stretched. And then finally he responded, his voice shaky. "What's going on? Why the urgency? You're going to want to see this. Come down to the lobby, Mark. Now." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned and walked out of the office, making my way back to the elevator. I wasn't sure what I was going to do when Mark arrived. But one thing was clear. This wasn't going to be easy. The moment I stepped back into the lobby, I felt a different energy in the air. The crowd had dissipated, but the remnants of what had just happened still hung there like smoke. I could still see Sophie standing by the revolving doors, her phone clutched in her hand, her expression still one of entitlement. But now she looked nervous. The events from earlier had unsettled her, and it was clear she was waiting for Mark's arrival. I didn't care about her anymore. She wasn't the problem. Mark was. The elevator doors opened and I saw him. Mark. He walked toward me, his face tense, his usual polished demeanor now marred by the anxiety I could see in his eyes. The man who had once been my partner, my ally, was now a stranger to me. The man I thought I knew was crumbling right before my eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, voice low, unsure. I didn't answer. I just nodded toward Sophie. She was standing there, her lips trembling, her phone still recording. Mark followed my gaze and froze. His eyes widened as he saw the woman who had caused the scene just moments before. But it wasn't Sophie I was focused on. It was him. Mark. The man who had let this all happen. The man who had stood by, smiling and charming, while the foundation of everything we'd built began to crack. "You need to fix this, Mark," I said, my voice cold, biting with the anger I had been holding in. "I'm not going to let this go. Not anymore." I saw it in his eyes the moment he realized the game was up. Mark was good at pretending. He was good at wearing a smile like armor, at making people believe he had it all together, that everything was under control. But today that smile faltered. His usual confidence, the one he used to mask his insecurities, was gone. "Katherine, I don't know what's going on here, but we need to talk about this calmly," Mark said, his voice shaky, but trying to regain some composure. "Let's just go up to my office, and we'll figure this out. I'm sure we can resolve whatever this is." I stared at him, my heart pounding. I didn't want to go to his office. I didn't want to be alone with him anymore. This wasn't about calming down. It was about exposing the truth. I shook my head. "No, Mark. We're not going anywhere until you face this. You're not getting away with it this time." He looked at me, eyes pleading, but I was done with pleading. I had seen enough. "You've let this place rot," I said, my voice steady and cold. "You've allowed things to go so far, and I've been blind to it. You're not the man I thought you were. You never were." Mark swallowed hard, his face paling. I could see the guilt creeping into his expression, but it was too little, too late. "You don't understand," he said, voice trembling. "I've done what I had to do, Katherine. I had no choice." My blood ran cold. "You had no choice. Is that what you tell yourself every time you lie? Every time you cheat?" I stepped closer to him, my words cutting through the air like daggers. "You've been hiding behind that mask of charm, but I see you now. I see the truth. The weight of everything I had been holding back, the years of frustration, the sacrifices, the blind loyalty, was crashing down on me. I wasn't going to carry this weight any longer. I wasn't going to pretend like it was all fine when I knew the truth." Mark took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching out to grab my arm, but I pulled away. "Don't touch me." Sophie, still hovering near the revolving doors, seemed to sense the tension, but she didn't dare intervene. She was too busy fumbling with her phone, trying to capture another moment for her ever-growing social media presence. Her presence was nothing more than a nuisance at this point. But something about her demeanor told me she was just as scared as Mark was. She knew what was coming. I glanced at her briefly before turning back to Mark. "I want to know everything. And I want it now." Mark opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He was stumbling over his own words, his usual confident facade crumbling before me. It was like watching a carefully built house of cards collapse in real time. "Why didn't you tell me, Mark?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me you were letting all of this happen? All the corruption, the neglect. Why didn't you tell me about Sophie?" His face turned red, his jaw clenched. The anger was coming now, but it wasn't enough. He could rage all he wanted. The truth was already out. "You don't get it, Katherine. I've been working around the clock for this hospital. I've been trying to make it bigger, better," he said, his voice rising. "This place needed me, and you." "You needed me," I interrupted, my eyes narrowing. "I sacrificed everything for you, Mark. Everything. I let you take the lead. I supported you. And this is how you repay me. By treating our hospital like your own personal playground. By letting someone like her walk all over you." Mark looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "You think you're the only one who's been working?" I spat, my frustration bubbling over. "I've been carrying this hospital, this family, this legacy. All while you were too busy playing CEO and having an affair." Mark took a step toward me, but I held up my hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to touch me, Mark. Not after everything you've done." I turned my back on him, refusing to let him see the tears I could feel welling up in my eyes. I wasn't going to cry. Not now, not in front of him. I walked towards the main entrance, my steps deliberate, each one echoing in the silence that had fallen over the lobby. Sophie was still staring at me, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. She had no idea what was coming next. As I reached the door, I turned around to face Mark once more. He was still standing there, lost, confused, and powerless. "You wanted to be CEO, Mark," I said, my voice unwavering. "You got it. But I don't need you to run this hospital anymore. Mark's face fell, and for the first time, I saw the truth behind his eyes. The fear. The realization that he had lost everything. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was knowing that I had let him win for far too long. The worst part was knowing that I had allowed this betrayal to happen under my nose. And now it was my turn to take control. The silence in the lobby was suffocating. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my back turned to Mark, the weight of everything hanging in the air between us. The world outside seemed to blur, as if time itself had paused. And then, just as I thought the moment would pass, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. It was Mark. He was moving now, quicker than before. His face twisted in a desperate plea. "Katherine," he called, his voice breaking. "Please. Let's talk. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You have to understand." I turned to face him, cutting him off. "I don't need your explanations, Mark. What I need is for you to take responsibility for what you've done. Not just to me, but to this entire hospital, to the legacy my father built." His face twitched, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I once loved, the man I thought was capable of standing by my side. But it vanished in an instant, replaced by the hollow shell of someone who had gotten too comfortable in his lies. "Look, Katherine," he said, his voice strained, his hands shaking. "I've been under a lot of pressure. The board, the investors, the hospital's future. I've been trying to make it all work. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want any of this to happen. Didn't want to hurt me." I echoed, incredulous. "You've already hurt me, Mark. You've been hurting me for months. No, years. And you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth." I could feel my blood boiling again. This was the man who had promised to be my partner, my equal. Instead, he had chosen to deceive me, to lie to me, to put his own interests before everything we had worked for. Everything my father had worked for. "You think I don't know about Sophie?" I asked, my voice cold. His eyes widened in shock. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the panic was clear in his voice. I laughed bitterly. "You think I don't see it? You think I didn't know you were sleeping with her? That you were letting her run around this hospital like she owned it? Like she had some kind of power over me, over everyone?" Mark's face drained of color. He couldn't deny it now. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it. "You didn't just betray me, Mark," I said, stepping closer to him, my voice low and dangerous. "You betrayed this entire hospital. The people who depend on it. The doctors, the patients. My father's legacy." His shoulders slumped, and for a second, I almost felt a flicker of sympathy for him. But it was fleeting. He had made his choices. And now he would pay the price. "I didn't want any of this," he said again. His voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I could control it all. But I couldn't." I leaned in, my face inches from his. "No, Mark. You couldn't control it. Because you've always been a coward. And now, we all have to deal with the consequences of your cowardice." He looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "Katherine, please. Don't do this. Don't throw everything away. We have so much. We can fix this together." "Together," I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "There is no together anymore, Mark. Not after everything you've done. Not after the way you've treated me. The hospital. My father." I turned to walk away, but I stopped when I heard him speak again. "Are you really going to let this all go?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You're just going to throw away our life. Everything we built. You're going to ruin everything over a mistake." I didn't turn back to him. I didn't need to. The weight of his words had already been answered in my heart. "I'm not ruining anything, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "You are." And with that I walked away, leaving him standing there in the silence of his own making. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the walls closing in around me. I had taken the first step, confronting Mark, facing the truth, but I knew the hardest part was still ahead. What would Mark do next? Would he fight back? And what would happen when the board found out? I didn't have all the answers. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The minutes felt like hours as I stepped into the elevator. It was almost surreal. Everything that had been building for years was finally starting to collapse around me. But even now, as the elevator descended, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. Something worse. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest. I had confronted Mark. I had let the truth spill out, and he had tried to hide behind excuses. But the words that had come out of his mouth were like daggers, each one twisting deeper. "You're ruining everything," he had said. But the truth was, Mark had already ruined it all. I had been the one who held everything together, who kept the hospital running smoothly while he played at being a leader. I had carried the weight of our family's legacy on my shoulders, and yet he had turned it into a house of lies. The real question wasn't whether I was ruining everything. The real question was, what was I willing to do to fix it? I was almost at the parking garage when I heard it. My phone buzzed in my purse. A notification. I pulled it out, expecting a message from Arthur, my lawyer, or maybe a follow-up from the board. What I saw, though, stopped me dead in my tracks. The screen was filled with images of Mark. But they weren't the pictures I had expected. They weren't the ones of the triumphant CEO or the confident man I had once loved.
Well,
These pictures were of him, with Sophie. And they weren't just casual. No, they were intimate. The images were taken from the hospital's security cameras, likely stolen, showing them leaving the building together, holding hands, looking like they didn't have a care in the world. They were shots of him, standing in front of his office, his arm draped possessively over her shoulders. There were even pictures of them in a hotel lobby, his hand on her back as they entered a room. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had been right all along. Mark wasn't just cheating on me. He was living a double life. And now the entire world was about to know. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking as I swiped through the images. I felt the old anger rise in me, bubbling to the surface once again. But this time it wasn't just anger, it was something deeper, something more dangerous. I had to act fast. I knew this wasn't just about Mark's betrayal anymore. It was about protecting everything I had worked for. It was about stopping him from destroying the very thing my father had built. As I clicked on the last image, I froze. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just some secret he was trying to hide from me. No, this was a full-blown conspiracy. The documents attached to the images showed a series of transactions, bank transfers, wiring payments made to Sophie. Big sums. Large enough to make anyone question their validity. I felt my stomach churn. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was financial. It was corporate theft. It was embezzlement. I couldn't breathe for a moment. How had I missed all of this? How had I trusted him for so long? But the answer was simple. I had wanted to believe in him. I had wanted to trust that the man I loved wasn't capable of this kind of treachery. But now I had the proof. The door to the parking garage slid open, and I stepped out, but the world around me seemed to fade. I was no longer just the woman who had been betrayed by her husband. I was the woman who was going to take this hospital back. As I approached my car, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Mark destroy everything. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about saving the hospital, about restoring my father's legacy, and about ensuring that justice was served. But there was one thing left to do. One thing that would expose him for good. I dialed Arthur's number without a second thought. "Arthur," I said when he picked up. My voice was steady, but I could feel the storm inside me. "I need you to prepare a press release. I'm going to destroy him." As the weight of the evidence settled in, I realized there was no turning back. Mark had crossed a line, and now it was time to make sure the world knew exactly who he really was. But what would happen when the truth came out? Would it be enough to take him down? And most importantly, what would Mark do when he realized his world was about to come crashing down around him? I didn't waste a second. I could already feel the fire burning inside me, consuming everything I had left of patience, of loyalty. Mark had crossed a line, and now I was ready to take back control. The moment I hung up the phone with Arthur, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. As I sat in my car, I stared out at the city, watching the bustling traffic of New York streets. Everything felt so distant now, like I was watching the world from the outside. People rushing to meetings, taxis honking, the noise, the movement, the life. It all felt meaningless. But this was real. I was no longer just the woman trying to hold everything together. I wasn't the dutiful wife playing second fiddle to a man who couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. I was Katherine Hayes, the chairwoman of Apex University Hospital. And if I was going to rebuild this place, I needed to first tear down everything Mark had built with lies, with manipulation, with greed. I wasn't going to play by his rules anymore. The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and meetings. Arthur worked quickly, drafting the press release, preparing everything for the storm that was about to hit. But I wasn't waiting for the storm to come. I was going to bring it myself. I knew Mark would try to spin everything. He would try to salvage what little dignity he had left, make it seem like he was the victim in all of this. But I wasn't going to let him. I wasn't going to let him lie his way out of this one. I'd been silent for far too long. But now the silence was over. At 5 p.m. the press release went out. It was blunt. It was brutal. It was everything I had been holding back for so long. The entire world was about to know what Mark had done. They would see the truth of his affair with Sophie, the theft, the corruption. And they would see me as the woman who took back her power, who fought for what was right. I took a deep breath as I hit send on the final approval. The world was about to change, and I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. But satisfaction was short-lived. As soon as the release went public, the floodgates opened. News outlets were already picking up the story. Social media exploded with accusations, with disbelief, with anger. People were furious. But in the midst of it all, there was one thing that caught my attention, one thing that shook me to my core. The voice of Mark. The phone rang, and I saw his name flash across the screen. I hesitated for only a second before answering. Katherine. His voice was low, filled with anger but also desperation. What the hell did you do? I stood up from my desk, my pulse quickening. I'm doing what you never had the guts to do, Mark. I'm taking responsibility for this hospital. You think you can just ruin everything? You think you can just destroy me like this? His voice cracked with a mix of frustration and fear. You think the board will stand behind you? You don't get it, do you? Said my voice icy. This isn't about me and you. This is about saving what's left of this place. This is about exposing you for the fraud you are. The board is going to have no choice but to stand with me. Katherine, you can't. Don't call me again, I cut him off, my voice sharp. The game is over, Mark. I hung up the phone, the silence in the room deafening. But it wasn't the quiet I had expected. It wasn't peace. It was the calm before the storm. I knew he wasn't going to take this lying down. I knew he would fight. He had to. And then there was Sophie. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done with me. Not by a long shot. The phone call had ended, but the real fight was just beginning. Mark wasn't going to let go of his throne without a fight. And Sophie. She wasn't going to go down quietly either. I had exposed the truth, but what would happen next? Would Mark fight back with everything he had left? Or would he crumble under the weight of his own lies? And Sophie, what role would she play in all of this? Was she really just a pawn in his game? Or was she something far more dangerous? The phone call was over, but the weight of Mark's words lingered in the air, as if he had left a piece of his arrogance behind. I could hear his desperation, his fury, but also something else, a faint glimmer of fear. And I wasn't done yet. I hadn't even begun to tear down everything he had built. As I walked through the halls of Apex University Hospital, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't a relief. No, it was the calm before the storm. The storm I had started. I could already feel the ripple effect of my press release spreading through the staff, through the board, through every corner of this place. But I wasn't here to bask in the aftermath. I was here to see it through. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped into the boardroom. The moment I entered, all eyes turned to me, some filled with disbelief, some with admiration, and some with fear. I wasn't sure who was on my side anymore. I wasn't sure if anyone really knew what was coming next. But I did. "Katherine, what the hell is this?" came a voice from across the room. It was Richard Hamilton, one of the senior board members, who had always been quick to side with Mark. His face was flushed, his fists clenched at his sides. I didn't hesitate. I wasn't going to let him control the narrative anymore. "This," I said, my voice steady but full of authority, "is the truth. Everything Mark has done, everything he's been hiding from all of you. It's out in the open now." A murmur rippled through the room. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for the next move. Richard's face twisted into a sneer, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He had believed in Mark just like I had. But now there was nothing left to defend. "Do you really think this is going to end well?" he spat. "You're not just throwing Mark under the bus, Katherine. You're throwing this entire hospital into chaos. People will lose their jobs. The board will never back you." I stepped closer to the table, my eyes never leaving his. "You think I care about your board?" I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "I care about the legacy my father built. I care about the people who work here, who give their all to this place every single day. I'm not going to let it be destroyed by greed and lies." The room fell silent. No one knew what to say. No one had the courage to stand against me, not anymore. But then a voice broke the silence. Soft, hesitant voice. "Katherine." It was Arthur Vance, my lawyer. He was standing near the door, holding a thick folder. "We've got a problem." I turned to him, sensing the urgency in his tone. "What is it?" Arthur walked toward me, his face grim. "It's about Mark. And it's worse than we thought." I didn't like the sound of that. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. Arthur opened the folder and handed me a set of papers. My eyes scanned them quickly, and then my blood ran cold. It was a trail of transactions, large amounts of money being moved under false accounts, hidden away in offshore banks. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the timing. These transactions had occurred just days before my father's death. "He was siphoning funds, Katherine," Arthur said quietly. "He wasn't just embezzling to line his pockets. He was doing it to keep this hospital afloat while making it appear as if everything was fine. He was covering up his mistakes, his failed investments." My mind raced. I felt sick to my stomach. Mark hadn't just betrayed me. He had betrayed my father's memory too. This wasn't just financial misconduct. It was criminal. "He's been lying to you, Katherine. All this time," Arthur continued, his voice low. "And now we have the proof." The weight of the truth hit me like a ton of bricks. All those years of trusting Mark, of standing by him, thinking he was the man I had married, the man who was supposed to help carry my father's legacy, had been a lie. A facade built on manipulation and deceit. And now it was time to destroy it. The walls were closing in on Mark, but what would he do next? Would he fight back with everything he had? Would he try to salvage what little was left of his power? I had the proof. I had the ammunition. And the clock was ticking. The question wasn't if Mark would fight. It was whether he could survive the storm I was about to unleash. It was all coming to a head. I could feel it in my bones as I stood in the boardroom, the weight of the decision I was about to make hanging over me. The truth was out there. The evidence undeniable. Mark had taken everything. My trust, my marriage, my father's legacy, and turned it into a house of cards. But now the storm was ready to blow it all away. The room was tense, everyone looking at me, waiting for the next move. Arthur stood by my side, his gaze steady. But I could feel his concern. He knew what was coming, and he knew I wasn't backing down. "We can't delay this any longer," Arthur said, his voice low. "Mark's camp is already preparing to counterattack. They're already spreading lies, trying to paint you as the villain." I nodded, my hands clenched at my sides. I wasn't worried about the lies anymore. I had faced worse than this. No, what worried me now was the damage Mark had done, and what he would do next. His desperation would only make him more dangerous. I turned to the board members who were still seated at the table, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. They didn't know where to stand. They didn't know who to trust. But I had to make them see the truth. "It's over," I said, my voice strong, unwavering. "Mark has lied to all of you. He has used you for his own gain, and he's used this hospital as his personal piggy bank. I've seen it. I have the evidence. And now, it's time for him to face the consequences." There was a murmur in the room, the tension palpable. Richard Hamilton, the board member who had always sided with Mark, stood up abruptly. "You can't do this, Katherine. He's the CEO. He's the one who made this hospital what it is. You're throwing everything away." I met his gaze, my eyes hardening. Mark made this hospital into a business. But he's forgotten what it was really meant to be. This hospital was built on trust, on integrity. And I won't let it be destroyed by his greed. Arthur stepped forward, holding up the file. "We have proof of Mark's embezzlement. We have the transactions, the accounts, the witnesses. And we have the recordings of his affair. This isn't a game anymore." Richard's face turned white. You're going to destroy him. Destroy everything." "Mark destroyed everything long before I did," I said, my voice quiet but cutting. "And now, it's time for him to pay the price." The door to the boardroom opened, and I didn't have to look to know who it was. Mark. He walked in, his face ashen, his posture stiff with both rage and fear. He had seen the press release, seen the fallout. And now he was coming to face me, to face what he had done. "You've made your move, Katherine," he said, his voice low, barely a whisper. "But you have no idea what you're doing. You think this is going to end well for you. You think you can just take everything I've built and burn it down." I took a deep breath, feeling the cold calmness settle over me. "I'm not burning anything, Mark. I'm rebuilding. I'm fixing the mess you've created. And I'm doing it without you." His eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't understand. This hospital, everything we've done, this was my vision. You were just the support, the background. Without me, this place would have crumbled." I stepped closer to him, my gaze never leaving his. "No, Mark. You were the one who was crumbling it. You were the one tearing it apart, piece by piece, and I didn't see it. But now I do. And I'm taking back control." Mark's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this, Katherine. You and your little lawyer can't protect you forever. The board will never back you." I shook my head, the anger rising in my chest. "The board is already backing me. They have no choice." Before he could respond, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't just the board or Arthur who entered. It was the rest of the staff, the ones who had been too afraid to speak out before, the ones who had seen the truth but had kept silent. Evan was there, standing tall, his eyes locked on Mark. And behind him, the nurses, the doctors, the employees who had supported me in the shadows, now coming forward to stand with me. "This hospital belongs to the people who work here," Evan said, his voice steady. "And we're not going to let you destroy it, Mark." Mark's face turned beet red. His fists clenched at his sides. He looked around, realizing he was surrounded. His empire was crumbling, and there was nothing left to hold it up. The walls were closing in on Mark, but it wasn't just the walls of the boardroom. It was the walls of the life he had built with lies and betrayal. And now he had nowhere to run. But Mark wasn't going down without a fight. And with everything unraveling so quickly, I couldn't help but wonder, what would he do next? Would he go down quietly, Or would he drag everyone else down with him? The air in the room was heavy, like the silence before a storm. Mark stood there, his back against the wall, surrounded by the people he had deceived. His empire crumbling piece by piece. For the first time I saw him for what he truly was. A man desperate to hold on to power, willing to drag anyone down with him. But this wasn't his moment anymore. It was mine. I could feel the weight of every decision I had made leading up to this moment. I could feel the years of sacrifice, the pain, the lies, the betrayal, all of it weighing on me. But there was something else too. Something stronger. The fire inside me, the strength I had rediscovered, burning brighter than ever. For the first time in a long time I felt like I was standing in my truth. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every board member, every employee who had stood by me. I saw the gratitude in Evan's eyes, the quiet pride in Arthur's face. They had been with me every step of the way, and they were ready for this to end. Ready for justice. But there was still one last step. One last thing to do. I turned to Mark, who was still trying to regain some semblance of control. "You've lost," I said, my voice calm, but every word sharp and deliberate. "And this time there's no coming back." His eyes flashed with anger, but there was no power behind it anymore. The fight had drained out of him. He knew it. I knew it. And the entire room knew it. "You think you've won." Mark sneered, his voice hollow. "You think this is over." I shook my head. "It's over for you. Not for me. This hospital, my father's legacy, it's still standing. Still here. And now I'm going to rebuild it. Without you." There was a moment of stunned silence. The reality of what was happening seemed to hit him all at once. His mouth opened, but no words came out. His shoulders slumped, the arrogant CEO facade completely gone. "Mark," I said, taking a step closer, "you've made your choices. And now you have to face the consequences. You've betrayed me, you've betrayed my father, and you've betrayed everyone who believed in you." I turned to face the board. Effective immediately, Mark Thompson is terminated as CEO of Apex University Hospital. All his decisions are now null and void. We will cooperate fully with the authorities in the investigation of his embezzlement and criminal actions. I turned back to Mark, who was now kneeling, his head hanging low in defeat. "You don't get to walk away from this," I said softly. "Not without facing the consequences." He didn't respond. He couldn't. There was nothing left for him to say. As I turned to the staff, I felt a surge of emotion rise in me. This is your hospital, your legacy. This is a new chapter, and we're going to rebuild it together. The applause started slowly, but it grew louder, filling the room. I saw the smiles on the faces of the doctors, the nurses, the staff, people who had been silenced by Mark's reign of terror. They had waited for this moment, and now they were free. They were finally going to be able to do what they loved without fear of retribution. I looked over at Evan. His eyes were filled with admiration and respect. I had done it. I had taken control. But there was something more I needed to do. Something I hadn't realized until now. I looked down at my phone and saw the message from David. "We did it. You did it." For years, I had overlooked what was right in front of me. David. The man who had always been there. The man who had never wavered. He had always been my rock, my quiet strength. And now I saw him for who he truly was. I stepped out of the boardroom and into the hallway, my heart pounding. And there he was, David, standing by the elevator waiting for me. His expression was soft, full of understanding. "You did it, Katherine," he said quietly. I couldn't speak. I didn't need to. My heart was full, my soul healing. Everything I had been through, everything we had been through, had led to this moment. I looked up at him and smiled. "Thank you. For everything." He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You were always strong. I've just been In that moment I knew. This wasn't just about the hospital or Mark, or the mess he had left behind. This was about me. About my strength. about my journey from betrayal to empowerment, about the courage to take control of my life again. And as I looked at David standing beside me, I realized that I wasn't walking this path alone anymore. We were walking it together. And no matter what happened next, I knew we would face it as equals. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it felt full of possibility. And I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Mark was gone. The hospital was safe. And the world knew the truth. But as the dust settled, I knew the real work was just beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had rebuilt what was broken. And now I was going to make sure it stayed that way. And as for Mark and Sophie, their story was over. But mine was just beginning. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.